Today's conversation explores what it takes to lead R&D in one of the world's largest commercial vehicle groups amid rapid change driven by electrification, autonomous driving, digitalization, and AI. TRATON, the Volkswagen Group's heavy vehicle business, unites brands like Scania, MAN International, and Volkswagen Truck and Bus, building a global R&D organization across continents and cultures. What makes this especially unique is the integration of 4 distinct engineering cultures into one shared R&D setup, something rarely seen in the industry. And to explore what that looks like in practice, I'm joined by Niklas Klingenberg, member of the TRATON Truck Board and head of Group R&D. And welcome to yet another episode of the Vanessa Eriksson podcast. I'm Vanessa, your host, and I'm here to bring you meaningful conversation with leaders and influencers on data, AI, innovation, and leadership. Let's get started. Niklas, how lovely to have you here. Thank you for coming. Thank you for taking your time this morning. Super cool. Why don't we begin with you introducing yourself to the audience?
Thank you for having me. So, Niklas Klingenberg. I'm heading what we call the TRATON R&D. I have a long background coming from Scania, 22 years within Scania in different roles, predominantly actually procurement, and then I was convinced to move to R&D. After 17 years in procurement.
Which is wonderful, right? Because you said you've seen this company from several angles, engineering, procurement, to global R&D leadership. How has that journey shaped the leader that you are today?
I think you're the sum of your experience. Yeah. So, and of course that starts even before you go to work. For me, it started early, taking big responsibility even at home. Yeah. Later, when I had my first summer job, I ended up after a couple of years when the owners of the local grocery store at home went on vacation. I had to lead then the store during the couple of weeks where they were on vacation at the age of 18. And I think also joining Scania then at the time, also there you got big responsibility from day one. And that always kept on, let's say, for every job that I basically took, I got more responsibility or was given more responsibility from the leaders at the time. And that of course have shaped, let's say, the way how I have grown over time into taking and assuming more responsibility. I had a manager who believed in me when I was in procurement and dared to send me at a rather young age to lead our purchasing organization in Latin America. And I was then 35. You can debate if that is young or old, but
that's a big responsibility, nevertheless.
It was a big responsibility, yeah. and of course you're sent out. It was still, of course, a part of the big Scania at the time, but it was the local Latin American unit, which is, of course, a long way from the head office, so you're connected, but anyway disconnected. And of course, also there you had to make a lot of decisions fully on your own. I mean, you could not rely on the head office, and you need to make daily decision, what is the best right now, without consulting different stakeholders that you probably did back in Södertälje. And of course, that kind of responsibility and challenge also shaped who I am today. And now we're only talking about the business, but also the culture side of living in another country. To be in an environment where you have to think about everything from a different angle. Yeah. I mean, I was the minority. I was the Swede among hundreds and thousands of Brazilians. And of course, that have definitely changed who I am today.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely, because it's different cultures, and leadership sometimes it's not so much about controlling every minute detail, right? Connecting people also. Yeah. I mean, but and also what I heard you say is I had a manager that believed in me and gave you the opportunity, because I think that is super cool. And I can imagine that it gave you a lot of energy, that somebody put that accountability on you and trust in you.
Yeah.
So what gives you energy today, Niklas?
Today it is more when I go down and do what we call go and see, meaning that you leave the let's say your everyday routine at the office and go into the real operations. I go down and visit the team in the organization, spend some time with them, understanding if they have worked on something where they have solved a problem or done a development, and they show what they have done. They can also show me something that is actually hindering them from making progress, or what are the obstacles that we need to fix in order to be more efficient, and to really spend time with the engineers and the teams. And I mean, that's probably when I come home and feel really excited, when I have spent time with the engineers.
I think that's cool that you go down on the floors, like in the manufacturing floors, and investigate, because I can imagine, I mean, when you talk about innovation, I think it sounds so cool from the outside, but I can imagine that inside it's kind of messy, chaotic.
I mean, I am a big believer that innovation happens in the interaction. It's very seldom an innovation happens when you sit on your own and start thinking. It's in a dialogue with different people, trying to solve a problem, and you might actually, by coincidence, make a finding that you start to spin on. And it's in that interaction, I think, most of the innovation actually happens.
So innovation is not really a straight line, isn't it? I mean, because you're dealing with here and now, what do we need to be doing, but also long term, where should we be going, what should we be doing? Yes. So how do you balance then that long-term research with short-term, delivery pressure? Yeah. Because I can imagine that you have some.
Yeah, absolutely. As every organization today. I mean, you need to make sure that we have products on the street tomorrow, but we also need to make sure that we have innovations that will take us into the future. And there are, of course, different ways of working. We have, let's say, sort of an own department looking at the research and innovation, and they are driving a roadmap. But then we also try to bring down to every engineer to also have a certain time that they can spend on innovation and let's say do what we call then, let's say, even before advanced engineering, but let's say in the borderline between, let's say, research and advanced engineering, where we need to try on small scale different things in order to really make, let's say, good progress and innovations for the future. So I think it's both one that is very structured with, let's say, a roadmap and a team that are thinking, working with universities, trying to gather the latest research out of different, let's say, everything from the academia to let's say, competitors and different, let's say, way of gathering research, and condensing that to, let's say, a scenario thinking of how can the world develop, and based on that you do different strategic directions to each and every engineer. Yeah. That, I mean, most people study an engineering because they want to solve problems. And of course then you need to release that power with the engineers, that they also have the possibility to spend some time of their, let's say, working time where they can really think about how to solve also long-term future problems.
So I'm thinking kind of like, sometimes it sounds like even if the ambition is clear, I think of making it happen is really the big thing.
Yeah, and historically, at least, I think we have been very successful. It will be very interesting now to see how we continue to be even more successful than in the new group constellation.
Yeah. But where do you see the biggest gap between strategy and execution?
You sit together often with the management team and you define a strategy. Start with the corporate strategy, then you break it down. And that's where it stops. You don't get it down to, in our case then, to the engineering level. It stops at some level of middle management where, let's say, the management team have continued to broken down the strategy into, let's say, tangible actions. So the biggest challenge and what we have identified and tried really now to make sure that we can also take the strategy, that it needs to go down to our employees, that they understand how they can impact the strategy. So what in their daily work life supports our strategy. So you connect the actions that we're doing on an engineering level towards the strategy for the company, of course via then the R&D strategy and so on. So I think that's probably the biggest gap, what we, let's say, have had and still are struggling with. I will not say that we are where we want to be, but I think we are on the journey to really try to put it down to the engineers so they can also feel that I understand how I contribute to the strategy. They maybe not always be the one defining the strategy, even though we try to do also, let's say, both the top-down but also bottom-up mitigations to see where we can meet. But that's where I think if we will be fully successful there, that's really when I think we'll make a big change.
Yeah.
Because when everybody understands how they can contribute, you also make things happen.
Yeah, and I think then that's, I absolutely agree to what you're saying, because I think that's also where then you add value to their, you know, meaning to their roles and what they are working with.
For me, and I think many of the people I work with, they are purpose-driven. So of course, to understand how I contribute to that purpose is super important.
Yes.
And even, I mean, even more so with the new and the younger generation coming out of universities today, they are, I mean, even though I consider myself purpose-driven, I think they are on a different level. And of course, you need to have a story for why you exist as a company that compels to you when you join from the university or from school or wherever, that I believe in where we are going and why.
Absolutely. And I think that kind of execution depends so much on my favorite topic, data and AI. Because, I mean, I think we haven't talked about it enough 10 years ago, because I think companies are still struggling with managing the data, and I think with AI, so what are we actually going to do? Where's the efficiencies to gain? But where, you know, in the transport industry, where data is so critical and so important to see, where are you, you know, seeing impact beyond pilots?
I think we can divide, and then coming back to data and AI. First of all, I mean, we have a long history of working with differently than many of our colleagues in the business. We started very early to do our own software in-house. Most of the automotive companies, they outsource the engine management system, for instance, to companies or sub-suppliers. Meanwhile, within the TRATON group, we have a lot of competence to do software in-house, and also then how to use data to actually do software that benefits the customer. With everything from sort of predictive cruise control, etc., to let's say other, let's say, software functions that is actually benefiting the product itself. Of course, it's easy then to get stuck in, we were successful in the past, so we will also be successful in the future. But where we are seeing AI and generative AI, I think you need to divide that in maybe 3 categories. One is, how does it influence the product itself? Because we see AI in the product, everything from autonomous driving to what we now are calling then software-defined vehicles, where you also will use AI in a lot of the functionalities for the future. Then you have the second category, which is maybe how do it impact the tool chain, not only in software but also in the hardware. So how does it make the product better? And then how do you, the third category is maybe what, let's say, outside, especially then the R&D, most are talking about how will it make work more efficient. So, and I think we are, I mean, in the first two, I think we are quite strong in our autonomous driving. It has been a part of, let's say, our work for many, many years. When it comes to the second part, how it will influence our product, we have a couple of things that are really, let's say, supporting our engineers. Everything from, I mean, we have, as I said, we are old companies, so we have, of course, gained a lot of knowledge. A lot of that knowledge is documented into design guidelines and so, but they are still documented, and they are in a big, let's say, data lake and maybe not very accessible for every engineer. So when you do a new design, you need to search for the documents and everything. With AI now, we have created tools where you can basically easily describe what you're working on and bring up, let's say, what are the, let's say, 50, 60, 70 years of history of learnings from the different brands also. And get that kind of design input for your new design of the vehicle. And so we don't repeat mistakes that were done in the past, because that's why we made the documentation. But I mean, you need to realize for an engineer every day to go in and search for 50, 60 documents, it just doesn't happen. It's super good knowledge to have. Now we have made it accessible in, let's say, it probably takes 30 seconds, and then you have maybe top 10.
What an efficiency of time.
So those are the things that really scale quickly. Yeah. But then you're also into other things that, I mean, when you go with a truck to a workshop, it's like, you know, you go to a hospital. You try to identify what is not working. So also here with AI, you can use diagnostic tools, and you can look for everything from let's say, anomalies to let's say, also other experience from other workshops, how they have solved the problems that is maybe a little bit more difficult to really allocate what is the root cause. And then that's also something we see scaling quite quickly now inside our workshop, but these are tools that are being developed within the R&D, how to support with diagnostics, for instance. And I think that's probably what you will see also in hospitals. How do you use when you come in with a symptom that is hard to, let's say, to specify exactly what it is. I mean, there is so much knowledge out there. With AI, you can just simply gather it quickly, and you can probably get, if you know how to ask the questions right, probably quite quickly come to a diagnosis. And that is how we also think about how to do repair and maintenance for the vehicle. So there are so many, I mean, the potential is enormous, and we are only scratching the surface yet.
Yeah, because I think that you're absolutely right. However, it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of stuff, so kudos. But I mean, what I hear is also a lot of companies are still struggling with getting value out of the data, business value. What has been harder for you guys in turning that data into real business value?
We're still actually talking quite a bit, because we collect data. Every vehicle that is being delivered out of the factory is actually connected. So we have tons of data. But of course, first you need to structure the data. So gather data, structure it, and I think that is still probably where that's the first step, to get the data organized in a way that you can actually then later use it. Yeah. But as always, I mean, it starts with that you have to have the data organized in one way or another in order to really take the benefits of AI. Because if it's unstructured, you will not sort it out. I mean, to a certain degree, of course.
I'm sorry, and I have to say, because then you will not trust it either, because if you don't have any structure in it, how will I know?
Exactly. Then you need to anyway validate that the answer that comes out is true. So it starts with that the data is structured in a proper way. But then we are still, I mean, trying to, and this has been a journey now for, say, 10 years ago. Some of the management teams visited Tesla, for instance, and they were at the time astonished with the amount of data that we have collected from all the connected vehicles out there, and we didn't do enough of it. So we are also trying to figure out how can we use that data in order to do customer value. How can we take that data to improve the vehicle, build new functionality out of it? And I think we are doing it, but I think we are still only on the, let's say, very surface of scratching the potential. So it will be very interesting to see how we can use that, but also how can we leverage on that data and include maybe other companies to take use of that data in order to, because I think there is enough data that we can also share and build new functionality with maybe new startups. And I think that is something that we are also debating. How can we maybe, to a certain degree, liberate data that we can also take use of in the ecosystem of transportation?
Do you see a challenge when you're talking about the data in the culture as well. Does that play any part in, you know, utilizing it?
No, not really. I don't see it. I mean, of course, we are now merging data from 4 companies.
Yes.
And as I
And
said,
continents.
and also continents, geography. So, but let's say from the fundamental perspective, I think we all share the same picture. I mean, this is a gold mine that we need to explore and use in a much more efficient way. So everybody is completely on the same track in all the brands, that this is an asset that we have that we need to utilize better. So I think it's really up to the engineering community, but also, I mean, innovation doesn't only happen in R&D, it happens of course in every part of the company. So, but I'm here of course now representing the R&D part of TRATON, but we should not also underestimate how innovation happens in how we do business, in meeting the customers, and so it happens throughout the company.
I think there's so much exciting stuff happening with AI, which I think is giving a lot of energy to a lot of data and AI teams. But I think there's also a lot of noise. Wouldn't you agree? Yes.
Yeah.
So what are you actively not investing in just now?
When it comes to AI,
yes.
I mean, it's hard to say what we're not actively investing in, but it's of course easy to say that, yeah, as you said, it's a lot of noise right now, and everybody's talking about AI, how it will change the world, and it will. I mean, in the same way that internet completely changed how we do things, AI will do as well. And I think we still have not seen, I mean, enough to fully comprehend how big changes we are having in front of us. But of course, you could scale this and ask. Everybody now needs to work with AI, and we are not trying to do that. So I mean, if that is an active choice, it's more that we still need to focus on delivering here and now. But at the same time, we need to invest in it. So we are, let's say, building up more and more capabilities, and both centrally to steer governance and to steer sort of the coordination of initiatives. Because I mean, I still believe that a lot of the real business value need to happen very close to the operations, to the business, where you solve a problem that is close to your heart, and that is happening out in the organization. But some of those initiatives are also good to scale, and then you need to make sure that those are possible to scale, and not everybody is working on trying to solve the same problem. And there you need a central coordination to see, okay, scanning the initiatives and see, okay, this one is probably useful for not only one area or department or team, that this can actually scale to multiple. Some of them will be completely unique, and they should be unique. So that's probably where we are being a little bit selective, because you could go all over the place, and that would also take away focus from the other things that we need to do. So it is a balance of letting the power free, but at the same time also making sure that we keep focusing on delivering here and now, that still is classical engineering work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and clearly I see, I mean, you've been a leader for a long time now, Niklas, but I think the leadership today is kind of, wouldn't you agree, a bit different?
Yeah.
Yes.
It is. No, but and I mean, there is so much uncertainty in the world. I mean, we have new technology coming in. In our business, we talk a lot about electrification of the vehicles, autonomous vehicles, and then now software-defined vehicles, or digitalization in the transportation sector. On top of that, you have for a part, and only a few years ago, electrification was also very big in the US. Europe have legislation when it comes to CO2 emissions, and China were the ones in our industry, in the heavy truck and heavy commercial vehicle industry. China were the late adopters. Now it has completely flipped around. So US basically left a lot of the agreements when it comes to CO2. Europe are lagging behind, and China is the one really scaling quickly. So you also have the geopolitics that is changing at the pace that we have never seen before. Regulations are different in the world, and as a consequence of geopolitics, what you do in the US you can maybe not use in China, vice versa, or Europe, etc. So there are so many changes happening, and then you have AI on top that is also another game changer. So as a leader today, you need to consider so many aspects in your leadership to both make sure that you are ready to abandon something that you have developed or are in the development because it's not longer relevant. That's how quick development is happening. And of course, as a leader, that's extremely hard. You know, you've been working on a project for a certain time and just realize that it's not relevant anymore.
Yeah.
You just need to pivot.
So is that what you had to unlearn, you know, what is not needed anymore?
I think that is for many leaders. I mean, you need to have the curiosity, you need to constantly learn what is happening, but you also need then to say, okay, I have learned new stuff that makes the old stuff not relevant anymore. So let's move on. Because it's so hard to actually leave. You know, you have been spending money developing things, and you maybe even be close to a production start in the worst case, and you say, well, yeah.
Wow, that sounds really, I mean, it's like letting go of your baby.
It is.
Yes.
And I think that is what we will see more and more with the speed of development that also AI brings, that you have to constantly learn and adapt.
Yeah.
And realize when it's time to stop.
Yeah. I think also, Niklas, I'm going to move to another topic now, because I hear great things about you as a leader, a true supporter of diversity. And I think it's important about who gets to shape it, you know, I mean, the future, who feels, I mean, who's also included in there. And in a traditionally male-dominated industry, what matters to you when it comes to building a more inclusive R&D environment?
You need to be interested in people. Yeah. And you need to believe that, at least in the foundation, that everybody wants to do good work. And then it's, of course, to put yourself sometimes in the shoes of another person, and trying to not be too quick to judge. Mm-hmm. But rather try to say, okay, I hear what you're saying, but have I fully understood what you're meaning? Because that can be two different things. You can say something that I can make an interpretation of, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I have understood what you want to say. So to sometimes also to really be an active listener and fully understand, and sometimes rather than making the judgment, asking a follow-up question to confirm or to, let's say, before I make my, call it a judgment of it, if it's a good idea or a bad idea, do I support it or should we have an argument? Do we agree or do we disagree? So listening is for me a big part of also creating, let's say, an inclusive environment, because that's also how you can, let's say, bring different perspective. And that is for me what diversity is about. How do you shape an effective and efficient team is, of course, that you bring people with different background, different experience, and you debate inside around the question, inside a team around the question. And the best argument should, of course, be the one winning. So you also need to be, if you're super firm on your own belief all the times and you're not willing to let go of better arguments, that will, of course, not, let's say, create an inclusive environment. Because if I always have right, why do I need other people? Then I only need people in my surrounding that agree with me. Yeah. And I don't want that. I want at least to be challenged to see if my argument holds, great, I had a good idea. It seems that my colleagues agree with me. But I also want them to disagree when they disagree. And then we have a discussion and debate. And that you do when you have different opinions in the room. If everybody have the same opinion, you will only capture a small part of the problem. And the risk is that you miss out on something that you could have captured before. And not when you have rolled out a new idea or a new way of working into an organization of thousands of people. So you need to cover as a broad, let's say, representation of the people in our organization as possible. And that, of course, you do with an inclusive and a diverse management team.
Yeah. And I guess that's also where your innovation also happens, when you have so many different ideas ping-ponging.
And I think this is a very good story for, let's say, the journey that we are doing now within the TRATON R&D, because all brands basically had their diversity and inclusion strategy, and it was on top of everybody's agenda. And I sometimes challenge my team because it's not easy. I mean, it's not easy to bring different cultures together.
Absolutely not.
And I tell this, that So when you were in Scania, when you were in MAN, and when you were in International, Volkswagen Truck and Bus, all of you worked with diversity and inclusion, and it was great, as long as it was inside. Now you're merging companies, and now also this other diversity is challenging, or I mean, if I accept a problem, it's not a problem, but I mean, but that's when it becomes real, when it's actually starting to be a little bit like, because then you're that's true diversity. That's where when sometimes this energy comes up, that's also when the good discussions happen, and when we go to the depth of that. That's when we also start to understand each other in a different way than we did. Now we start to really bond, and you take the other perspective. You start to understand each other better. So I think it is really a good foundation for and it's also learning. I learn a lot every day of both diversity, inclusion, and let's say how to bridge cultures.
Yeah, I think you're on the absolute right track, Niklas. But so 5 or 10 years ahead of you, what would define a strong R&D organization?
I think that you have adopted to the new prerequisites of the world. You manage flexibility. We call it agile way of working, but I think that's kind of also a buzzword. Flexibility and changes. You manage speed. Yeah. Because I mean, we see how quick they can develop cars in especially China, but partly also the US, where we, especially in Europe, need to catch up. You have adopted to AI in a way that you actually integrated into your everyday working. And I compare it with internet. I mean, when internet came, people also struggled to find the real value of it. And if you look today, nobody's question. I mean, it's a part of everyday life. Yeah. That's how AI will be 5 to 10 years from now. And who masters that in a way that and then you combine that with what I said previously, that you need to be able to let things go, because things will change quickly. And then you just have to say, tough, let's cut the tail, let's move on, and let's focus on the next thing rather than dwelling on what happened in the past.
So it sounds like leadership is less about having the certainty, being flexible. Yes. Is that, what do you see then would be the one quality that every leader needs to have? What would be key?
Curiosity.
Curiosity.
You need to constantly learn as a leader and try to stay on top of it. And curiosity in many different ways. Curiosity in the team, or what happens in the team, what happens in the organization. You need to know your business that you're working on in order to guide the people how to and the organization how to work. I mean, if I am as a leader not interested in the daily operation of my team, how can I lead them? So that I think is, let's say, of course, a prerequisite. But then that comes with curiosity. How does things work? How does things not work? Why is it not working? And how is AI now going to if you're not curious, then you will not develop as a leader as well. Then you will stagnate.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think that's a really good place to end. If I have one last question, what makes you genuinely proud of TRATON R&D today?
I'm super proud of how far we have come on this journey. I mean, we started as, I mean, we have been working for a long time together, especially Scania and MAN has been working for more than 15, 20, almost 20 years together in different shapes and form. And some has been very successful, some has been maybe you could wanted more. But if I see now how we really grow together as becoming one team, and there are still struggles, of course, but if I just look at the journey from where we started to where we are today, I see tremendous progress, and on all levels, actually. So how quickly we have, let's say, come together as becoming one team, and really buying into that this is a necessary shift from the past, because the prerequisites are different today than they were 10, 15 years ago. And how we are, let's say, for every day that goes, working to let's say, constantly now improving our output. And we are, let's say, really keen on making sure that this becomes very successful. That makes me very proud every day.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have one last one again. If someone listening is considering joining the TRATON R&D, what would you tell them in one sentence?
If you're interested to work in a very dynamic environment, developing the future transportation, where you have the opportunity to work with colleagues from US, Mexico, Brazil, Sweden, Germany, India, China, welcome.
Wow, that sounds so good. I mean, that's so encouraging and exciting. What a journey ahead. Thank you, Niklas. I've truly enjoyed this conversation for all your input, your insights, and your, so kindly sharing with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for all of you listening, thank you for joining in. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And don't forget to leave us some feedback, good or bad. We always love it. Bye for now.